So, I do have a microphone. I am turned on, but I'm not being microphoned or amplified. So, I'm loud enough so everybody should be able to hear. So, I see some new faces out there. So, for those who do not know me, my name is Martin Knowles. I've been coming to the temple for about 5 years now, and I'm one of the facilitators. So, we get an opportunity to progress and get to a situation where we will facilitate. So I'm not a lecturer, I'm not a teacher. I'm just a student like you who has been asked to help facilitate some of your understandings about these things and present some material. But again, it's not up to me to teach you, it's up to me to help you learn. So there's a difference there. So please try and follow through that. So with having that said, hi there. With having that said, today's class is about attitudes and benefits of learning the Dharma. So this class is level 2. It's meant for people who have been studying the Dharma a little bit or have some history with Buddhism. Are there any people here who have never come to a Dharma class or never studied Buddhism before? You can put up your hand. That's fine. Okay, so if Saturday works out for you, that's okay. We are still working with the core teachings. This is the handbook that we'll be using. It's available in the bookstore downstairs. So we're always going to be referring to this book. So if you don't have it, please go get it downstairs.
Like right now?
No. We all won't fit in the elevator. So.
And also, I believe there might be a few copies available at the library too.
Yes, thank you very much. So the library, if you go straight down along the Cultural Museum here, there's a library. If you're a member of the Buddhist Light International Association, the membership is free. If you're not a member of our Buddhist support group then and registered, then it's $10. So it's cheaper than buying the book if you want to rent it. Okay? So when we talk about attitudes and benefits of learning the Dharma, first of all, we should talk about what is the Dharma. What does the word Dharma mean? Any volunteers to help me with that?
Any of the teachings of Buddha.
Right. Okay, so they're the teachings of the Buddha. But the name is also not just specific to Buddhism. It also means, Anne?
Seeing things as they really are.
So seeing things as they really are, which is an aspect of wisdom as well. And also the truth or the way or the law. So what it is Dharma are the teachings of the Buddha pertaining to the way things really are and the path to understanding things as they really are. And in the handout, I talked about, because it is the teaching of the Buddha, we should first look to what his name means, the Buddha, and it means the awakened one. And when we look at that, I put in my notes that we should consider the Buddha not only the goal of being fully awakened, but also the path. So the Buddha was a man. He wasn't, someone that rode in on a horse of glory or came down from a UFO. He was a human being. And as a matter of fact, when we go through the notes a little bit more, it's specifically the state of being a human being that's most advantageous to learning the truth. And there's an asterisk beside the word Dharma. If you go into your core teachings and look at the glossary at the back of the book, under the word Dharma, it'll also say Dharma with a capital T. This is just a footnote. Dharma with a capital T or capital D means the teachings, the truth, the law. With a lowercase d, it is referring to phenomena, things in the world. So when they say that all dharmas are empty, they're not referring to the teachings of the Buddha, they're referring to phenomena, to objects, to events. So don't get confused by uppercase and lowercase d. Okay. Because Dharma teaches wisdom and the way to go to wisdom, these things are precious. I mean, you look at what's common in the world, and there's, entertainment tonight, and there's watching the Kardashians, and there's all of these things, and there's a million ways to distract ourselves. But think about when was the last time you and your friends sat down and say, this is the way things really are in my life. Those conversations are rare. And even more rare are the people who can have those conversations with you and provide benefit to you. So it's precious. It is rare in our world. So, having said that, that's one of the major attitudes that we should have about Dharma, is that it is precious. And as a matter of fact, it's saying that we should prepare ourselves for that. So, is anybody familiar with the story of, the cup? And it's been in a couple of movies that, the Dharma master comes to a student and says, are you ready to receive the Dharma? Are you ready to learn? And he puts out a cup and starts to pour tea into it, and the student keeps on pouring, and the Dharma teacher says, doesn't say stop, and it's overflowing. And he says to the student, your mind is like this, that it's so full it can't receive any other teachings. But actually the parable, the story, the understanding goes further. So I like to call it, we'll Canadianize it. These are the 4 properties of the Tim Hortons cup. So the first thing, a good Tim Hortons cup has to be the right side up. If it's upside down, can it receive anything? Right? If you're not open, if you have come to this class to confirm that you're right and Buddhism is wrong, you might as well leave now. Because it's a debate we're not really interested in. Right? It has to be clean. Your cup has to be clean. So if there's all sorts of gunk inside your cup, you don't want to affect the liquid that you're pouring into it, much like the teachings. So if you come with biases, or if you come with delusions, or if you come with preconceptions, that's going to color everything that you put into that cup, which is your mind. The cup also has to be able to retain the teachings, so it can't have a hole in it. If you go to Tim Hortons and you're going through the drive-through, and it's pouring out the bottom of it, you're probably not going to appreciate that. So in the same way, once you have the teachings, you have to be able to retain it. You have to be able to hold it and consider it and investigate it. So that's very important. And the 4th property of a good Tim Hortons cup, when you roll up the rim, you should win something. So, although you could take it further and say, if you follow the Buddhist path to its confusion, you won't have to play again in the next life, you see. And the other thing too is humility. I mean, you may just want to suspend your own belief in things, your own bias on things, to maybe think that a tradition of self-awareness and development that's over 2,500 years just might have something to teach you, just to give it a chance. So I think that's really important. The other attitude that I think in the way to look at Dharma and the Buddha as a doctor, the Dharma as medicine. So we can go around, and there's a lot of people who will have illnesses and will not go seek help. It's easy for us in our personal lives or in our health to look at a situation and say, well, I'm comfortable with my misery, right? It's like being in a terrible or abusive marriage, Has anybody seen Woody Allen's movie Annie Hall? There's a line at the end of it. He says, my uncle's crazy, but he thinks he's a chicken. But we keep him around because we like the eggs. So it's sort of like that you can just make do with things the way they are. So what the Buddha says is, as a human, himself being a human, is that we all have this level of suffering, or you can think of it as another word of dissatisfaction. And once you realize that you're never really at peace, you're never fully satisfied, or that your satisfaction is reliant on things that are always changing, that are not dependable. Once you realize that you have this dissatisfaction in your life, you think of it as an illness, and you want to take a medicine to fix it. So what do we do when we're ill? We go to a doctor, and we say, is there a medicine for this? I haven't been able to cure myself in the way I've been approaching my life. How can I cure this dissatisfaction, this unhappiness in my life? And the Buddha has that medicine, which is the Dharma. So when we look at the Dharma, we treat it as a medicine. So a couple of things then. If your doctor gives you a medicine, what do you have to do with that medicine for it to be of any benefit? Pardon me? You have to take it. Right, you actually have to say, I'm going to get up, I'm going to remember to take my medicine. That's the first thing. And you have to do that on a predictable, reliable basis. You take out the container and you look at it twice a day with meals or whatever, and that's the way you have to take it. You have to apply yourself. And the problem is, most of us will relate to our symptoms, right? So if you ever had a prescription from your doctor and it's for a cough, and you stop coughing, but you have half your pills left, how many of us stop taking those pills? I venture to say most of us probably have unfinished prescriptions in our fridge or in our medicine cabinet because the symptoms are gone. And I see this in classes. I think everybody has seen this, where people will come into these classes or will approach an investigation of themselves because there's been a drama, because there's been a tragedy in their lives, or something that they have to get over, or something that in an immediate sense they have to deal with. Well, the problem is once those symptoms go away, we say, well, now I'm just back to my regular level of dissatisfaction, so I'll stop taking the medicine. I'll stop taking the Dharma. And then people will stop coming to temple, stop coming to a practice until the next drama happens, until something else negative happens in their lives. And then they come back and said, I really miss temple. And isn't meditation wonderful? Right? Until things calm down again. So you have to take it consistently. You have to take a look at your life, and you have to take a look at how much happiness you have in your life. And then think of Dharma as medicine. The other thing that a lot of people will do is when they'll take a look at Buddhism and they'll take a look at Dharma, and it's said that there's 84,000 doors to Dharma. It's said there's so many sutras. It's not like the Bible or Islam or Judaism, where there's the Torah or the Bible, right, where there's one book. There are loads of sutras. There's loads of different traditions. And the thing is, you have to take the right medicine. Now, all of these different teachings are basically one teaching that's taught different ways. And why is it taught different ways? Well, it's taught different ways because you're talking to different people. You're talking to different cultures. And you're talking to people with specific problems. So the teachings, a particular teaching, and I've met several people, and I say, when you come to class here, don't expect everything that falls out of people's mouths to be a nugget of gold and helpful to your life. But we are panning for gold. And there will be a particular truth that'll give, and as Jan Taylor, who's another facilitator, talks about, we have those aha moments. And it sort of clicks. And it makes sense. And it drives you to help investigate it. And that's really important when you look at the opportunities that are before you. Another attitude that I'd really like you to be able to focus on is how rare this opportunity is. I mean, how fortunate we really are. First of all, the conditions that we enjoy in Canada. You know, the fact that we live in a democracy, that we don't have Russians taking over parts of our country, right? We don't have floods, you know, happen to us all the time, or massive earthquakes, or, you know, we're very, very, very lucky. We're not in a war-torn country, okay? And additional to that, we have a human life. And there's been Buddhist books that talk about a human life, and a human life being particularly advantageous for learning the Dharma. It said, if you're reborn in lower realms as hungry ghosts, as animals, it's hard for you to really realize the Dharma. And even if you're in a heavenly realm, it's hard for you to realize the Dharma, because, you know, you're so much in bliss and so forth. And think of it that way, that, you know, if you're down on a Caribbean vacation, do you really want to study? Right? It's almost distracting, and it's difficult in some ways. But as a human, we have to live a life where we have to fight for our happiness, because there's always something else that says, here's how you can be happy. And we live a life that has impermanence. You know, we go to funerals and people are grief-struck that a relative has died. But who out of anyone here is going to get out of this alive? Unfortunately, nobody, right? It's going to happen. So it's a matter of appreciating what we have and people when they are here for the gifts that they really are. So the three properties of being a human that particularly allow us to realize the Dharma is, number one, that we're able to retain it, that we're able to learn. So if you're a mouse, you're probably not going to be retaining the Dharma, right? Also the fact that you have to have the ability to perfect your conduct. We can have a sense of morality. We can govern our behavior. And thirdly, that we have courage. Okay? And just think of the first time you came to class here. Okay? If this is your first time, you may be able to relate to it now. Does it feel uncomfortable? Did it feel strange? And now think about the fact that everything in your life that is comfortable now was once strange, was once unfamiliar. So it's a matter of keeping yourself open to it. So this opportunity is particularly precious for us. The other way of maybe looking at it is you probably worked really, 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 really hard in your past lives to get this opportunity. You're here because you earned it. You're here because your conduct allowed you to create these conditions where you are. And how rare is that? The Dharma, the story will go that this opportunity is as rare as a turtle at the bottom of the ocean that comes up, what is it, every 100 years? Now let's say the turtle is drunk. A drunk turtle at the bottom of the ocean that comes up every 100 years, and there's a hula hoop floating in the Pacific Ocean. And the chance of that turtle every 100 years poking his head up in the middle of that hula hoop is about the same as the opportunity to be a human at a time and a place where the Dharma is available and you have the conditions and the opportunity to study it. It's said to be that rare, as if you consider it that you're never going to have this opportunity again. Right? And we take our time for granted. We burn up time all of the time. It's so easy now. If you're unhappy, just find a different way to entertain yourself. It's so easy. Instead of really living life for what it is, a gift. So, having said that, in the core teachings, again, and if you don't have it, there it is again, it talks about an appreciation of how the conditions, how you should approach Dharma. Okay? So it talks about the four reliances. So, the four reliances are, and feel free to talk about if you've had any personal experience in this, we rely on Dharma, not on teachers. Okay, so we all care deeply about Venerable Manyi, but should we rely on her? Is it possible that Venerable Manyi may be at a different temple? When I first came here, Venerable Manyi was the presiding venerable over the English Dharma classes. Then she wasn't for a while, and she's back for a while. The sculptures that you see on the side, almost all of those sculptures rotate around other temples. It's a practice of non-attachment. And plus, individuals have their own perspective on the Dharma. Each facilitator that's going to run these classes will approach it in a different way. Some more empathetic, some more philosophical, some more investigative. So that it's always affected. The teaching of the Dharma is always affected by the individual. So you should focus on the Dharma, not on the teacher, because the teacher is impermanent and subject to change. It makes sense, doesn't it? Most Dharma actually makes pretty good sense. So, we rely on wisdom, not on knowledge. Okay, so wisdom, not on knowledge. Well, what is the difference? Anybody help me? Yes, Len.
Knowledge is having facts and figures in your head.
Right.
Wisdom is understanding
Right. And understanding is a very good word, but I would say actually almost experience it. Have it actually investigated into your life. This is not a hobby. Buddhism, Dharma is not a hobby. It's not something you put on your charm bracelet. It's something that is a medicine. It's a tool that you use in your life to be happier and make those around you happier. It's about value in your life. And it's about not being satisfied with just being dissatisfied. So when we talk about Dharma, it's often said in the Dhammapada of Buddhist scripture, talks about one life absorbed in meditation is better than a lifetime not absorbed in meditation. Just one day. That seems like an extreme example, but unless you actually investigate this stuff, unless you actually get to the wisdom, not just be content with knowledge, you don't progress. So it's a direct experience. Yes?
If I may just ask a question.
Yes.
It's the wording that the Master has in the book that I would just like some clarification on. What is the difference between wisdom and knowledge? Wisdom is the truth that already lies within us, and that's what I'm having a lot of trouble with.
So wisdom, yeah.
How can the wisdom be the truth that's within me?
Okay. So,
That's all.
once we, so the Buddha, when he became enlightened, this is the most direct way I can say it to you, says he just become enlightened. He's seen the truth of all existence. And he said, every sentient being has the wisdom of the Buddhas. It's only because of our ignorance, because of our delusions, that we don't see it, that we can't use it in our lives. So, once you remove your individual desires, once you remove your delusions from something, there are certain human virtues that are true. So in other words, when you really seek deeply into something and you see that everything is changing, you know within you that everything is impermanent. Why do we consider certain things permanent and certain things impermanent? I would put it to you that the things that we really like, we want to stay permanent. The things that we don't like, we want those things to change real fast. Okay, so I'll give you a good example. Outside. What's this winter been like?
Crap.
Did we want it to change?
Yes.
We really did. But if we really looked at it and removed our desire, today is what it is. So that truth is within us. We have to remove it. But to be able to directly experience, you have to do the work to look within. It's not enough to say the truth is within. You actually have to do the looking. So, yes.
Maybe another way of thinking of it is knowledge is something that we acquire. And so we get more and more facts and stuff into our heads. We can feel good about that and it's useful. But wisdom is really when it's not so much acquiring something as getting rid of our delusions. Right? It's letting go of things that are false.
So I'm not going to learn how to be wise here. I'm going to learn how to uncover the fact that I already am.
That's one way to think of it. Right?
You-
It's acquiring wisdom is a process of getting rid of delusion.
Yeah.
Right?
If you think about it this way, you are already enlightened. You just have to get rid of the ignorance. So what?
All of us, if we get rid of our greed, our anger, our pride, our ego, like if we get rid of all these negative qualities, what's left? We call wisdom.
Right. So you say, where's my contentment, for example? Right? I'm sitting here, I'm so stressed out. Where's my contentment? You tell me contentment's inside myself. Crap, it is. I'm not content at all. But then you say, okay, well, I'm just going to focus on now. Yesterday has already happened. Tomorrow hasn't happened yet. All I have is right now. If I worry about my mortgage payments, I'm not going to be able to pay them by sitting and worrying about it. So you settle down, you just focus on being here and being now. And then you find out, oh, there's contentment. It was there all along, but it's being covered up. So I'd like to sort of illustrate the difference between knowledge and wisdom and investigation to get to wisdom. So I'm going to do a little experiment. Everybody put your books down and your pens down and lift your right foot off the ground and circle it clockwise. Circle it clockwise. Is everybody doing that? You're circling your foot clockwise. Now take your finger and do the number 6. Okay, how many people kept on having their feet go clockwise? Nobody. Okay, so if I were to tell you, here's the number 6. Don't draw the 6 backwards. Don't cheat. If I were to tell you that, without getting you to lift your foot and actually do it, would you believe it? You'd say, no, I'm the master of my reality. My foot does what I tell it to do, right? Well, there's the problem. So we pick up and we actually do the work. We actually investigate. And we find out this is the way our brain is wired. This is the limitations of the bodies that we have. Everybody go home, you can practice it more. Okay? So if any of you can do that when you go home, don't bother coming back to class, you're perfect. Okay? So, just a little experiment. Okay, so that's the difference between, just learning knowledge, learning a theory, and actually penetrating it and investigating it. Meaning, not words. We rely on the meaning, not the words themselves. The words themselves are containers. The words themselves, the ink on the pages, the book itself, my words, you hearing it, are all just tools. Within that structure, within that vessel, are the meaning of the words. And that's what you should focus on. The meaning of the words only come to you when you put your mind to them. And we're looking for the ultimate truth, not a relative truth. Ultimate truth is something that does not change, whereas relative change is sort of like kinda, sorta, maybe, only if this happens. So ultimate truth is not reliant on things that are subject to change. Okay, so in other words, you have to do that investigation. 4 states of mind. Any questions about the 4 reliances? I'm breezing through this, but this, the more you think about this, the more you understand this, it's sort of like a multiplier. If you have your effort here and your investigation here and you multiply it by actually relying on the proper things, your realizations are much more profound and much more readily available to you. Sorry.
You forgot the 4th one. The 4th one for the reliances.
For the ultimate truth?
Yeah.
I just sort of mentioned that it shouldn't rely on outside conditions for it to be true. Okay? Yes?
I may want to move on, but just very quickly. I find the reliances are actually really useful when you encounter doubts or you kind of get a real stopping point when you're studying. So if you hear something you don't agree with, right? Or someone says something in Buddhism, like a lot of people, for example, have trouble with rebirth, right? Like the existence of rebirth and whether or not that's actually true or not. And if it's not, that kind of like things everything else in the debate. Going back to the four reliances is actually very helpful in terms of understanding, okay, well, what am I actually relying on? Right, so am I relying on knowledge versus wisdom or experience? Am I relying on what the teacher said as opposed to like what the Dharma actually says, like the whole of it, and that kind of thing? Or something like, your favorite teacher goes away, right? So do you suddenly now stop studying the Dharma? Right? Or do you actually remember, okay, well, I need to rely on the Dharma, not on the teacher? Right, so it's really useful, like when you hit sort of crises of faith, or when you hit kind of real doubt about what the teachings are saying. Because quite often, if you stick with it, or if you just leave it alone and come back to it later, it makes sense. But we can hit those doubts and kind of say, well, this doesn't make any sense, or this is contradictory, or whatever. And if we just kind of take that attitude, it's because we're not relying on the right thing. So we just kind of can remember that, go back to it, and often it's helpful for us to get back on track.
Yeah, thank you very much. And who are you?
Student.
No, your name is?
Greg.
Greg. So Greg's a fellow facilitator. So just so you know who you're talking to, because we have a couple of new students. So maybe a good practice is when you raise a question or something, say your name so we all can sort of get familiar. Okay, so again, the core teachings, I just bought the brand new shiny 10th anniversary. I make a practice of giving these away. So this is the 10th, and it's shiny and new and ooh. So it's got that new Dharma smell. So the more you read, and we say, you know, how many times have I read that? I've probably read that book 40 times. Each time I read it, I get something more out of it.
This book?
Yes. Yeah. And it's like Greg often describes it, Dharma and your practice is like peeling back a layer of onions. And you're actually in real danger when you go, oh, I get it. Because then you peel back another layer and you go, oh, well, that's not it. Or, oh, I really have to do this in my life. Just like the foot going around. Right? You say that things are impermanent. Okay, I get that. And then you look at your family and realize they're going to be gone sometime. So why am I arguing with my wife? Or why am I taking time to be with my children? That's applying it. Okay? So, 4 states of mind for Dharma study. The first one is faith. And that word freaks a lot of people out. Especially people who are first coming and we start talking about faith. So, in most Western traditions, what does faith mean? In Western traditions. Anne?
Accepting a particular creed that you have to believe, or
Right.
maybe even in some instances of blind faith without questioning.
Okay.
depending on the people.
So, unquestioning, apply what you've been told. Okay, anybody else? Yes?
Belief in something that can't be proven.
Belief in something that can't be proven. So maybe someone's saying, you know, I have this question, you know, in another faith, another tradition, and that other tradition's answer may be, just have faith. Settle down. Okay? What faith is in Buddhism is really more like a confidence born of investigation. Once you know something to be true, by your own investigation and penetrating it and applying it to your life, and like Buddha says, biting it to make sure it's like gold, right? Then you have faith in that. You have faith in it. And you have faith in yourself because of that truth, because of the work that you've done. You have faith in it. Okay? It's not that you should have faith because we're telling you to have faith. Patricia.
Is it the same kind of faith that people say you have faith in Jesus? And is it the same kind of faith?
Well, if in your heart you take the example, okay, so sort of striving out of this, okay, and it's tough to bring all sorts of other religions into it, but if you think of Jesus as within your own heart, of treating others as if they were your brother, of a philosophy of love and so forth, if you have that faith in your heart and you have confidence in it and you know that it works, that's the sort of faith that we're talking about. If you are not stealing something from someone's car because you have to have faith in Jesus, that's not what I'm talking about. Okay, so in other words, if say, why should I do what Jesus says? Well, because I have to have faith in him. Okay, why do I have to accept this? I have to have faith in him. Okay, Buddhism is not what you have to do. It's what you should do. It's what you want to do because you want to be happier in your life, because you want to see things as they really are. So it's not external, it's internal. That's the best way I can give you. You don't have faith in external power, you have faith in your internal power. And that power is born of investigation and born from confidence. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So questioning. Buddhism says, question. There's lots of other schools of faith that say, don't question. Right? You know, don't talk about evolution. It's voodoo. Right? It's about questioning things. It's about saying, is this all there is to my life? Do I have to live unhappy? Why am I always bored? You should question. And Buddha says that. He says, don't believe it because it's written. Don't believe it because someone said so. Don't believe it because the elders say so. Don't believe it because I say so. Buddha speaking of himself. Believe it because you've investigated it, you've tested it, and you've borne it to be beneficial to you and others. Then apply it to your life and share it with others. That's what Buddha says. Okay, so it's questioning is a constructive thing. We want to distill the Dharma in our lives and find out what's true. And we use it, okay, to cut away ignorance. So if you want to go along, you were talking about, all the truth being internal. If you want to go along, you'll see several figures that are Guanyin, or Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. In other words, a figure of compassion. And we see it with multiple hands. And in the hands, you'll see there will be a sword or a knife. And people will often ask about that on tours that we do. Say, how can a Buddhist figure have a weapon in his or her hand? And the answer is, it's cutting away ignorance. Okay? It's cutting away ignorance. And cutting away that attachment. Okay, that is hampering you in your life. Okay, so in other words, an example I like to use, when we talk about this, everybody is very prone to agreeing with the statement, we are responsible for our own happiness. Right? Would most people agree with that? But how many of us can truly accept that we're responsible for our own suffering? No, that's someone else's fault. Okay? But even in the first one, why did you marry this person? Well, he makes me happy. Why do you like hanging around with this person? Well, they make me happy. No, they don't. No one can make you happy. No one can make you sad. That's up to you. That's up to you. So, this is where the questioning comes in. A life lived unquestioned is a life left not worth living. I think it goes. Awakening. Okay? An attitude of awakening. In other words, you're open to wake up. And the Buddha himself means the awakened one. Well, what does that mean? Have you ever driven along on the highway and taken the wrong exit? Have you ever driven along in a car or walked, and you're walking, and then all of a sudden, where have I been for the last 10 minutes? How did I get here? Have you ever looked at the clock after watching TV and realized, where did the last 3 hours go? How awake were you in your life? How open were you to truly experiencing your life? So life is not a dress rehearsal. Okay, we don't sit back and say, okay, now that I've learned this stuff, now I get to go back and take a mulligan on my life. Right? This life is a gift. So you have to have an attitude of awakening that you are going to take this medicine, you are going to take this truth, the way the world really is, and a way to find out the way the world really is, and apply it to your life. You want to be better. You want to be happier. You want your life to be authentic. You want your relationships to be authentic. You want to stop blaming other people for the problems that you have. And you want forgiveness. You want to express loving kindness. All of that sounds good, right? But you can't go pick it up at Walmart. You have to apply the Dharma. And the last one, no mind. What does no mind mean? That's kind of freaky, isn't it? Use your mind to, I've just been saying, use your mind to promote faith in your heart. I've been talking about the cup, mind, and then it says no mind. What does that mean? Why would that be beneficial to a practice of awakening or a practice of investigation? Yes?
Doesn't it mean no self?
Sort of. It's not a conceptual thing, though, but you're heading definitely in the right direction. Definitely in the right direction. Pardon me? You let things go. Yeah, that's certainly part of it too. Shireen? So non-discrimination is a big part of it as well. All the things that have been said are certainly aspects of what we call no mind. But, and there's no way for me to really talk about. Buddhism will often describe things that can't be spoken of. You know, we'll say, like nirvana, we'll say, well, you can't describe it. And then we spend 2 hours talking about it. And say things like, it's sort of like this, and it's sort of like that, and it's not this. Because by describing things, you put limitations on them. Okay? So having said that, perhaps I can talk about it this way. How many of us have internal narration all the time? Okay, internal narration. So in other words, you're sitting and you're in a bus or you're in a car and you're going, I wonder what's for dinner. Did I do that? I got to go to the bank today. I wonder if I have to renew my passport. I'm hungry. Maybe Roll Up the Rim will give me a coffee. You're always having narration in your life. This play-by-play guy always talking about your life. Right? Always. And it's like you want to experience your life. You want to be awakening to your life. And you've got a play-by-play person constantly judging things, having discrimination, constantly imposing yourself on things, constantly attaching to things. When we let that go, when we let that objective state of mind and just be subjective about things, in other words, allow the experience to overtake. And we've all had those moments, right? Like when you're walking through a forest and all of a sudden you realize you haven't thought about anything for a few minutes. But you only get that after you come out of that, right? I was reading this Korean monk, and he was talking about it in a book called Enlightenment is a Big Mistake. And his students were asking him, this one chapter was about no mind. And his students were saying, can you tell me no mind? Can you give me no mind? And he said, give me $10. And the student says, well, why? And he says, well, if you give me $10, you can go see the movies. And have you ever been to a movie and at some point, if it's a good movie, you forget that you're in the movie theater, don't you? You get swept up in the experience of the movie. If any of you have seen Gravity recently, the movie I saw in 3D, is an incredible movie. Just totally draw me in for like 10, 15 minutes. You forget about it, right? That sort of absorption of non-judgment, of not constantly commenting on things, of not constantly judging things, to bring to a practice that you're going to open yourself up to understanding the Dharma. So in other words, you have to apply that. Now think of yourself at the movie theater, and there's a guy behind you talking. How irritating is that? Right? Someone behind you yapping away or click, click, click on their iPhone, or right, lighting up because their screen just came on. It's very distracting, isn't it? That's the way that internal discussion happens in our lives. So the term of no mind, although it can't really be described directly because it's experiential, what it's saying is, don't rush to judgment when you're studying the Dharma. Investigate it. We're so ready just to dispel things before we actually apply them to our lives. So when we talk about concepts like no self, you say, of course there's a self. I'm standing right here. Hello? We have to be able to open it up and be able to investigate it. Okay. So, questions? Yes. Greg.
Yeah. My name is Greg.
My name is Greg.
When you were describing no mind,
Yes.
it sounded actually maybe potentially a little bit contradictory to some of the other states of mind.
Right.
So you talk about how they're not really in opposition or they're not contradictory. Especially in terms of like, if you're being mindful, if you're in an awakened state of mind.
Right.
That doesn't seem to be consistent with kind of just waking up after being in gravity and saying, okay, well, it's just part of the experience. How can they be consistent?
Okay. So let's choose any of these with no mind. So the state of mind of faith, how can harmonize with no mind, you're saying, right? So faith, again, when you look at faith, it's a confidence that's born of a realization that this is the way things are, that goes beyond description. It's actually part of you. And that, okay, so let's put it this way. I don't have to be conscious that I'm 6 foot tall. I can have faith that I'm not going to hit my head down that door because the door frame's higher. Without any judgment, I have faith that I'm going to fit through that door. I don't have any mind or conception about how tall I am. I'm just going to walk through that door. I have faith that I can do it, but I'm not constantly judging about it. And it should be, and ideally, it should be that natural. When you have questioning with no mind can be non-judgmental, but we're able to focus. Okay, so how can you be non-judgmental but questioning, right? Which could definitely be a contradiction. Are we constantly imposing an answer before we have a question? So in other words, if we're constantly coming here, and ideally what I should be doing as a facilitator is having you walk out of here with more questions than you came in with. If you walk out with more answers, hopefully I try and provide a little bit of inspiration and, you know, have everybody look and say, hey, there's something here for me. But at the same time, okay, you should be able to walk out of here thinking, it's just, I shouldn't just go out of here and just accept things the way they are. Okay, so you're having no mind because you've already born and had faith in the fact that you believe that you're worthy of happiness. And the UN declared March the 20th is International Day of Happiness, I learned this morning. But you should be happy all year round. My wife and I don't celebrate Valentine's Day at all. No flowers, no cards, no chocolates, no dinner, because we believe every day should be that. So I don't know if I've answered that, but for this first class, let's leave it at that. Yes.
This is Sheila.
This is Sheila, everybody. Everybody say hello, Sheila.
My serious question is therefore, does your wife make chocolate and flowers every day?
Actually, I will be honest with you. My wife has officially told me no longer to bring flowers to her office. I bought flowers. She's German, I'm English. She's not that romantic. So she has said, enough with the flowers at work. So, there you go.
A nice strudel, though.
A nice strudel, maybe? Some rouladen? Some goulash, maybe? Sorry.
I have one question. Mine is you. Do not follow my idea. In third eye, how can I know the world? It's the same matter on mind.
How can you know the world?
No, you third eye, my passion, first passion. How can I know the world?
Without a first-person perspective on things, how can you know the world?
Yeah, because you said no mind means do not attract my own passion.
Right, okay. So, when you are going through the world, okay, so why did people think the world was flat? Pardon me? Go ahead. Eric, yeah, there you go.
Because they didn't have science back then, so they had no knowledge of anything.
Right, so they were relying on what? On what they just saw, right?
Relying on the Bible.
Yeah,
Whatever holy text
right.
was.
But they were also looking at, what does the horizon look like?
Well, they were just going off of what they can see.
That's right. So the world looked flat, so they said it's flat. Right? Okay, so the same way when we look at the world, we look at it from our perspective. And I turn around, and guess what? I'm at the center of the universe. Right? So you say the world revolves around me. The same way we used to think that the sun revolves around the earth. When you think deeply, and Thich Nhat Hanh, actually, a great quote of his, I says, if you see deeply into one thing, you see deeply into all things. And once you realize that you are not disconnected from the world, you are looking at it from your perspective, because right now your temporary perspective are your set of eyes in your body in this life. But in reality, you are connected to all things. So you may have this vision from this perspective, but you realize that without further separating yourself from the world, you are connected to everything. But that's up to you to figure out. Grace.
I was just wondering, with the four states of mind, would that be a process of our, is a gradual process of our practice, or it can be one unit of our mindful movement?
Yeah, okay, so yeah, I think all these are progressive. I think complete understanding is always preceded by partial understanding, right? You think about it. I mean, you're running a marathon, and at the end of it, hopefully, what do? You cross the finish line. Do you all of a sudden cross the finish line? No. You've had to run for 26 miles to cross the finish line. But if you were only to focus on the last 10 feet, you go, presto, sudden marathon, sudden enlightenment. So yes, enlightenment, which you may be thinking of, or a realization, a fulfillment of one of these or all of these states of mind can seem to happen in a blink. You have sudden insight. But that's normally preceded for most of us by work, by training. Does that sort of answer? Yeah. Shereen.
Like I go for a walk and I'm trying to be no mind. I walk in like half the pain and then someone's smoking. I'm like, oh that guy, what a jerk. Oh that kid's crying. Why did the lady not you stop her kid crying? Oh they're kissing. It's so embarrassing. I don't want to see them, you know. And I'm thinking, no mind, no mind, peace. Okay, trees. I'm trying to more this whole world. Just try to focus on the moment. And I think, oh those stupid people smoke. Why do they smoke? Why don't they quit? They bother, you know. And then I'm thinking about work. Oh why did they do that? I should just let it go, let it go, let it go. And then it comes back and it's like, oh no, let it go, let it go. No. Different perspective. Okay, you know, like yesterday I'm teaching, right? And it's March break, and I want to go home, and I'm going to teach it my best. What's wrong with it, you know? And I'm thinking, okay, they want to go home, it's not my thing, and I'm trying to look at their perspective, and still it bothers me. Like, let it go, think of their perspective, focus on something else, but it still bothers me. So how do you get out of that?
She's talking about the
Shireen,
That's the first time she's watching in 6 months,
Yeah.
by the way.
and I've just discovered the job you should have. You should be the lawyer at the end of the commercial about terms and conditions of things. You'd do so well at that. I think the thing is are you going to walk out of here and say, I'm always going to have no mind, or I'm always going to be mindful, or I'm always going to be aware? You can say that, but you're going to fail more than you're going to succeed. This is progressive. So, do you have a GPS in your car? Okay, so you may not get this, but for those of you who have a GPS or know how it works, if you take the wrong corner, what does your GPS say? Right. And that's what you do. You're walking and that person's smoking and you go, ba ba ba, and you go, oh, that person is not irritating. You're being irritated by your thoughts of that person. Right? You can blame your unhappiness on them, or you can simply say, oh, what can I learn about myself from that person? Right? And then recalibrating and back on the course again. But if you simply say, you interrupted my state of non-judgment, you idiot, right? You're not going to make any progress. Because it's not about getting back to the refuge of this mind. It's about finding out what distracts you and why, and working on it. And working on it. So the fact is, you know, there's stories of monks being in caves for 10 years. And a student comes up and, what are you doing? I'm studying patience. I'm contemplating on patience. Well, can you teach me? No. I am contemplating on patience. Well, I'd really like, get out of here. And it's actually, there's talk about Bodhisattva path. There's actually a school of thought that says those are our real teachers. The people who challenge us, the people who irritate us, those are our teachers. The people that are always shining you up and telling you you're wonderful and everything's great, how much do you grow from that? Not much. It's nice, but how much do you really grow from it? So it's the people that challenge you that actually expose it. And it's said that Dharma, perhaps we can finish with this because I don't want to cut our discussion time. Dharma is a mirror. That it's going to reflect you. It's not going to reveal you, it's going to reflect you. But what you do with that vision is up to you. Okay, so we have 3 questions. I want to split into 3 groups.